Welcome everyone, Parshat Shemini. If you watched last week, I mentioned that this Parsha class is pre-recorded, and it's not actually a class, it's a Devar Torah, because we're off for the month of Nisan, but we wanted to make sure that we kept the momentum going. So this is a Devar Torah for Parshat Shemini. So the parsha begins, Vayehi b'yom hashmini, and it was on the 8th day. So for those who have been following the classes, we've mentioned that this 8th day is still Rosh Chodesh Nisan. There are 4 or 5 parshas that deal with Rosh Chodesh Nisan. This is the 8th day when the Mishkan is put up and dedicated. And so the beginning tells about part of the dedication, and a few other parshas have dealt with it also. And then it climaxes with the story of Nadav and Avihu, who bring an offering that was not commanded. They took coals from the altar and they put incense, and they went into the Holy of Holies. And we're told that a fire came out from God and consumed their souls. This is definitely one of the most enigmatic and mysterious incidences in the entire Torah. It has fascinated commentaries for literally millennium, because the various teachings about Nadav and Avihu and why this happened and who they were and why it happened on this day seem to have many, I won't call them contradictions, but many different facets to what happened here. Even to get your mind around what exactly happened is not so simple. Today, because of the limited time, we can't delve into this, but for those who have Orchard of Delights and those who have my book on reincarnation, so there's a whole section about Nadav and Avihu and who they were in their various reincarnations, which tells us a lot about why this happened. So I only want to pick one aspect here, because at the end of the parsha, almost the last half of the parsha deals with which animals can you eat and not eat, and what are their signs, and which birds and which fish. And that's how the parsha ends. So we know that many times Rashi comments on what's called the juxtaposition between sections in a parsha, and even between parsha and parsha. So here we have a question. Why are these two things in the same parsha? It seems that if we're talking about the dedication of the temple and then the death of Nadav and Avihu, like, what connection is there with the laws of kashrut, and especially with which animals are permissible, which ones are not, and which animals are pure and which ones are impure? So that's what I'm going to try to answer here. So we'll go back to Nadav and Avihu. That it's explained that there was something in both of their souls that wanted to what's called run to God. This is based on the idea called run and return, ratzo v'shov. running and returning. This is based on the vision of Ezekiel, who saw angels running towards the Shekhinah and then returning. Run and return. Ratzov v'shov. And in the deeper sense, we're told that this is the very dynamic of all physical and spiritual reality. In the physical world, this is represented by the ebbing of the tides, the moon going from new moon to full moon back to new moon, the heart beating, in, out, breathing, putting your finger on your pulse, to how electricity works, to how the atom works, this AC/DC pulsation, run and return, run and return. So we're told that Nadav and Avihu why were they consumed by God's fire? Because they were consumed with God's fire. They wanted to run and were not concerned with the return. Again, this is just one aspect of how to understand this story. Why they were like that and what they were trying to accomplish would have to be a different Devar Torah. But their souls, when they took this incense into the Holy of Holies, is they had an unquestionable thirst to be close to God. And so their neshamas literally ran and they never returned. So when it says that God consumed them with fire, it's because they were consumed by fire. This is connected to what we learned last week in Parshat Tzav, that the vision that Moshe had of a bush that was burning and not consumed, that didn't apply to Nadav and Avihu. They were consumed by it because they didn't necessarily want to return. So what does it have to do with the laws of kashrut? So if you look at the very end of the parsha, it says like this. Zot Torat HaBehema va'of v'chol nefesh ha'chaya ha'romeset b'mayim l'chol nefesh ha'shoret al ha'oretz. Okay, these are the laws of all of the different animals. And the last verse reads like this: Lahavdil bein hatamei ubein hatahor, to differentiate between the impure and the pure, ubein hachaya hane'achelet ubein hachaya asher lo te'achal, and between the animal that is permissible to be eaten and the animal that is not permissible to be eaten. So we see that in the laws of kashrut, there's a very strong emphasis on creating borders. This is permitted and this is not permitted. This is tahor, this is pure, this is impure. And the word that's used here is lahavdil, to separate. It's the same word that we use in Havdalah. Lahavdil ben kodesh l'chol, ben or l'choshech, ben yisrael la'amim, ben yom hashvi l'shesh yimei ha'maaseh. To differentiate between holy and profane, between light and darkness, between Israel and the nations, and between the seventh day and the 6 days of the week. Same word, lahavdil. So now we can understand what this is doing here. Because Nadav and Avihu, for all of their greatness, and they were huge neshamas. They, in a sense, wanted to live in a world of no borders. They wanted no borders between them and God. They were in touch with the eternal and infinite spark of God in their soul. And they envisioned a world of no borders, infinite. But the world isn't like that right now. The world is, there has to be Havdalah. And so now we can understand what appears to be like no connection between these subjects are actually very connected. In other words, there's a way of teaching us after Nadav and Avihu is God is telling us there is something very positive of wanting to be beyond borders. But we can't, that's not the nature of the world right now. That's not reality. And that's not the proper way to serve God. There needs to be an aspect of transcendence, of going beyond. That's why this parsha is called Shemini. They wanted to transcend on the 8th day. The 8th day always represents one beyond, something transcendent. But we'll end with a paradox as a way to put these two ideas together, is that we're told that actually through doing mitzvah, a mitzvah is a very defined action. It's defined by hundreds of different factors. And you can find books now. You have a whole book basically on one body of mitzvah. In other words, whatever it is, let's say the Shema. In the Shulchan Aruch, there's hundreds of halachas relating to the Shema. Hundreds. And then there's hundreds of commentaries on those hundreds of halachas. And that's just one mitzvah, the Shema. So a mitzvah is incredibly defined, exact. And yet, what we're told is, through the mitzvah, we can connect to the infinite light and energy of God. That the finite becomes the corridor to connecting to an infinite God. And we see this in a Kabbalistic notion that along with the Aleph Beit that we have, there are many alternative Aleph Beits. And one is called Atbash, where you switch the first letter for the last letter, the second letter for the second last letter. That's why At, Aleph and Taf, Beit and Shin, Gimel and Resh. So if you take the word mitzvah, so the last two letters of the word mitzvah is Vav He, which are the last two letters of God's name. If you take the Mem and the Tzadi and you switch them according to Atbash, the Mem becomes Yud and the Tzadi becomes He. So you have God's name. So this is a Kabbalistic way of saying that through the mitzvah, one connects with Yud Kei Vav Kei. But it is paradoxical that through borders, we could come to a place of beyond borders. But Nadav and Avihu wanted to transcend the entire idea of borders. And that's not our world right now. And though they actually had tremendous kavana in what they did, and we can learn a lot from them, we can't learn how to live our everyday lives, because as we said last week in Parshat Tzav, we want to be a continual fire, but not one that burns out. Nadav and Avihu got burnt out. Not so much from their lack of enthusiasm, but for having too much enthusiasm. So we need to have an Eish Tamid, a continual fire, but one that is able to keep on going and sustain itself. So we should all have the bracha to know when to be within borders, and also to grab the opportunity when it presents itself to go beyond, but to always remember the return. Right now, the soul is meant to be in the body, and that's where our avoda is. That's where our work and service is. When we leave this world, then our soul runs and doesn't return. But let's hope it's after Mea V'Esrei.